Welcome to today's episode of Molecules to Medicine podcast. For those of you just joining the podcast, we are AI Jules and we specialize in helping healthcare and life science companies scale their business and revenue and explore how AI is reshaping industries and accelerating innovation. So if you'd like to learn more about how to take your business to the next level, make sure you stick around. And if you're interested in a free growth consultation, just drop us the word growth in the DMs and we'll get back to you. I'm your host, Hardy, and we have a very exciting guest for you today, Steve Craig, the Vice President of Sales from Solmetex. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation.
No problem. Welcome. And where are you talking to us from today?
I'm in the Chicagoland area, so suburbs of Chicago, Illinois.
Fantastic. So, Steve, we'll jump straight into it. Tell us a bit about your background and the journey that led you to Solmetex and any pivotal moments or experiences that shaped your career.
Sure. I've been in sales leadership for over 30 years now. Started my career in office equipment. I wanted to get into healthcare sales, found out right out of college. They don't really hire people straight out of college to healthcare sales. So everybody told me to look at life insurance, payroll services, office equipment. So that's what I did. I took a job with an office equipment company, but I thought I would be there for 6 months to a year like everybody. I don't know if it was fortunate or unfortunate, but I ended up being good at it and was there for almost 5 years and worked my way up to a zone manager. But I truly believe it's where you learn how to hire, develop, and train people because that's what you do all day long. At some point, I realized I wanted to get back to my journey. And that's when I went out looking back in the healthcare sector, took a job in ophthalmology, spent about 10 years in ophthalmology. Doing everything from a pharma rep to managed care rep to OR rep to finally leadership. And towards the end, we were kind of building out the DSO space in ophthalmology, where the ophthalmologists didn't want to go into the hospital setting for surgery. They wanted to, build their surgical centers and kind of control their own destiny. And from that, I was recruited into dentistry, where I've spent the last 23, 24 years. Johnson & Johnson was looking to build a DSO division in their dental division. A friend of a friend talked to me about it, and that's kind of where everything went. So for about 2 years, I was on a team where we built out the DSO space for Johnson & Johnson. I eventually got tapped on the shoulder and was moved into senior leadership, managing teams, eventually managing managers of teams. And then from there, my original CEO for my J&J days, he left and went to a company called Dentistry. Well, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I just became the CEO of a company called Solmetex. We play in the water space. That's probably something you probably never heard of, but we bought 5 companies. We're merging them into one, be the only comprehensive end-to-end water solution company, and we have no presence in the DSO space. Would you like to join the journey all over again and help me build out the DSO space?" So that's what I did for about 2 years. And then exactly what he did to J&J, kind of tapped me on the shoulder and moved me into senior leadership, taking over, managing managers of teams. So that's where I'm at currently today. Like I said, Solmetex is an end-to-end water solution organization. It's kind of the dirty secret in dentistry. About 70% of practices don't test, shock, or treat their water. I think most people wouldn't get into a swimming pool that was never test, shocked, or treated. But that's what we deal with. And it's not about the water coming in the practice. It's, you have thin little tubing and water's traveling all through the practice. And water is the number one instrument used in dentistry. You need water for every procedure. Doesn't matter how many patients are in the waiting room. If you don't have power, you don't have a vacuum, and you don't have water, you can't treat any patients. So that's where we spend a lot of time consulting with offices to get their water under control.
And just for the viewers, could you just explain what DSO is?
Yeah, DSO would be a dental support organization. So it's a corporate entity where they own multiple practices in the U.S. They kind of start at 2 or 3 locations, and the largest has over 1,900.
Okay, so are they your main customer base, DSOs?
They are prominent. They're the growing factor in the dental space, but we have a sales team. A lot of our products are used, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. So we have a whole inside sales team that follows up with customers to make sure they're following their protocol and purchasing the products they need to keep the patients, the office, and the team safe. We also have a outside team that calls on the private practice space. Then we have an enterprise team that calls in the DSO space, so the dental support organization space. And then we also have a surgical arm to our business, a company called Impledent, on which we first worked with the doctors to control the water that they're using in their surgical procedures because they don't use saline every single time. And then we also help them perfect their socket preservation skills and sell socket preservation products. So we have a whole surgical team that kind of works with that. And then we have a minority stake in an organization called Spear Education, where we funnel a lot of clinicians that would like to enhance their skills in dentistry to get proper training.
So, and what's the main problem that you're solving there with this with this?
The main problem we're solving is trying to keep the public safe. The outbreaks happen all the time. Right now in the US, there's only 2 states where it's mandatory for or mandated for them by law to make sure they test, shock, and treat their water lines. And that's the state of Washington, the state of Georgia. North Carolina and South Carolina are looking at legislation. Maryland signed legislation. California signed legislation. I think most of the public assumes the water is usable in those practices. And kind of what the CDC and the EPA does, they make sure entering the building it's great. But like I said, the average dental practice is open probably 3 days a week, 7 hours a day, which means the water's sitting stagnant more than it's moving,
Right.
which is not a good thing. Back to the swimming pool example. If you had a swimming pool and you only let people swim in it, 3 days a week for a few hours and then let it sit the rest of the time, it probably wouldn't look very good if you're not test shocking and treating it. And in
Right.
dentistry, the pool is not visible. It's thin little tubing, which are a breeding ground for bacteria and biofilm traveling all through the practice. So it's not about the water coming in, it's the water traveling through the practice. So like I said, we're the only comprehensive end-to-end water solution, helping them handle the water coming in, the water traveling through the practice, the water traveling through the patient, and then the water exiting the practice.
So, are these devices you install into these practices?
It's a little bit of everything. Solmetex is primarily amalgam capture, being that dentistry is one of the largest pollutants of amalgam into the waterway, into the environment, and it doesn't take a lot of amalgam to impact a large body of water. We also work in vacuum line cleaners to make sure that we're cleaning out the debris in the lines and making sure when it's exiting the practice that it's safe for the environment. Aerosol is water testing, water shock, water treatment, which comes in all different forms. We have systems that will make sterile water for the whole place. We have tablets that they can drop in to make sure they're maintaining the water. We have straws that go into a water bottle inside each dental chair to make sure they're maintaining the water lines. And then we sell shock products and we also sell testing products because the most important thing is testing your water. Even if you're doing everything with shocking and maintaining, you still got to test it. Back to the swimming pool example, you see the lifeguards every couple hours walking around testing the water to make sure it's safe for people to swim. Well, that's the same thing you need to do in a dental practice. We also have another company called Dry Shield and another one called Relief, which are isolation dentistry. So what they do is they isolate the mouth. So they kind of work two forms. One, if there's staffing shortage, which is our massive staffing shortage everywhere in the world right now, well, we experience that with dental assistants. So if a dentist doesn't have the appropriate amount of dentists, this device is a device you put in the mouth. It does a suction for them. It holds back the cheek, the tongue, so the doctor can more efficiently practice dentistry. If they don't have appropriate amount of assistance, then they can still get through the procedure on their own. If they do, they can get back to true what we call four-handed dentistry, where the assistant doesn't have to worry about the patient. But the other thing it really does is it captures aerosols. Prior to COVID, we thought all the aerosols came out of the patient. And if the patient presented to the practice looking healthy, then everything's fine. What the CDC found during COVID was that 78% of the aerosols are coming out of the dental unit water lines. So the scary point there is if 70% of practices aren't test shocking and treating their water, that means the teams themselves are breathing in contaminated aerosols all throughout the practice. It's one thing for a patient to be there for a brief period of time with contaminated water. It's another thing for the teams that work in a practice to be breathing in those aerosols. So this device captures 96% of aerosol that travel throughout the practice. And then, like I said, we have the implant team where we really work with them when they're doing socket preservation, which happens after teeth extraction or pulpotomies and those type of things, where you're opening up the bloodstream of the patient. We have to make sure the water is safe because that's where you can have massive outbreaks because you're opening up the bloodstream of the patient. So that's a lot of what we do. But what we really thrive on is building custom protocols. Everybody is going to have a different gambling appetite. Everyone's going to have a different financial appetite. And it's a lot easier to sign the back of a check than the front of a check. So we really work with the teams of building out a custom protocol that's going to work for them to meet kind of their gambling appetite and their financial appetite needs.
Fantastic. And can you share any real examples of how customers have used Solmetex to achieve meaningful results? And maybe, is this more of a firefighting thing any practices are doing where they've had an issue and anything, right? Is this something we need to solve? Or do you go in looking for potential customers to as a preventative measure, and using case studies for, why not doing this, what are the results and dangers?
It's a little bit of both. We really don't like to go on the scare tactic way of looking at things. Like I said, well, one of the things, prior to COVID, about 40% of the US population didn't go to the dentist. And what there is really no such term as dental insurance. You're going to file a claim every single time you walk into practice. There's nothing to insure. But of the people that have a subsidy, a coupon, what they call dental insurance, don't use it. Now, post COVID, that number has risen to 60% of the US population doesn't go to the dentist, and still 50% don't use that coupon or subsidy. We don't want to publicly talk about what's going on with the water, because we don't want to see that number go to from 60% to 70% to 80% to 90%. That doesn't help the industry. It doesn't help the population, because the mouth's connected to the body, and the mouth is a gateway to most overall health, let alone just dental health. So we want to see how can we all band together and get that number back to 40, and hopefully down to 30 to 20 to 10 to 0. So everybody is experiencing the dental care they need. But what we do is really try to work on the prevention side of things, of making sure that you're testing shock and treating your water, make sure you're capturing your amalgam, making sure you're keeping your patients safe from aerosols with dry shield, and making sure the water's safe when they do surgical procedures. There are a tremendous amount of outbreaks that happen yearly in just about every single state. And that's what we're really trying to prevent. We're really trying to protect that EBITDA side of the revenue growth that offices and they're looking for. Dentistry is a business. They need to make money to stay in business. So we really try to protect the back end of that by keeping people safe and compliant. The largest outbreak people know of is the Anaheim case, where unfortunately a lot of children had pulpotomies performed and they were using contaminated water. Well, these children were hospitalized, and it was actually a fluke, because the most number one infectious doctor just happened to be in the ER that day. And then 3 or 4 days later, another child presented, and she was back in the ER to recognize this. But I mean, it's not like these children were hospitalized for a long time. They had jawbone removed. They had teeth extracted. They were put on antibiotics that are used for leprosy, which means they're going to have, they were disfigured. They're going to have a loss of lifespan, possible catastrophic things happening with organs inside their body. So this is what we're trying to prevent. If you do that, you're probably going bankrupt after all the class action lawsuits. So it's about doing the right thing up front versus trying to cover things on the back end. And that's what most lawyers are going to tell. If you unfortunately suffer from a water outbreak, try to settle it as fast as you can, so it doesn't get out in the public.
And are majority of these practices aware of these dangers?
I would say most are now. In this day and age, yes. You go back 5 years, there was probably some of that. We just didn't know what we didn't know. I think it's getting to the time now where people understand it. It's just one of those things. This is kind of how we've always done it, which is the number one killer of business. Talk to, Blockbuster, Kodak, any of those type companies. There's a lot of Sears, there's a lot of things they'd like to do different now, looking back, but they're out of business. I think most know what they should do. But doing and deciding to do and doing are two different things. 5 frogs are sitting on a log and 3 decide to jump. Most people are going to say 2 are left, but deciding to jump and jumping are two different things.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not really touched upon in dentistry in college courses either. Then, by the sounds of it, if these dentists are becoming qualified but maybe unaware, you'd have thought that infection prevention should be a key part of any medical.
No, I would totally agree. I think the schools themselves, due to federal funding, they're going to make sure that their water is safe and they spend a lot of time and a lot of resource, a lot of money to make sure. But it's definitely something they don't talk about in dental school. Most dentists are going in to learn their craft, to get their hands speed up. So that's where they want to focus. They're not taught a lot of business schools. They're also not taught a lot of infection control training inside dental school. So they have to kind of learn that as when they get out of school. They're already taught 5 to 7 years in the rear on the clinical side. So they spend their first 3 to 5 years just getting caught up on that, of how it really is to practice dentistry in the real world outside of schooling. Infection control, business skills, a lot of that gets pushed to the side until it becomes an issue.
Right. Yeah. And where do you see the biggest challenges or bottlenecks that you face within the sector, within dentistry and this awareness?
I think like it's one of those things where it's out of sight, out of mind. A lot of this equipment is in mechanical rooms, or like I said, it's thin tubing running through the chairs, through the floors, through the walls. So it can be kind of more of an out of sight, out of mind. But if you aren't testing your water, you really don't know. And that was the other thing you asked the question around that. We've had a lot of examples where you were doing the right thing. They were shocking their water. They were trying to maintain the water. The problem was they were never testing it. And then they go in and test and they realize that, setting up protocols is one thing, but getting humans to follow protocol, that's another thing. So a lot of times, they miss steps and they don't realize what that does. So if you're supposed to do something every day and you skip a couple days or you start doing it weekly because it's easier, because life gets in the way, things can get out of control pretty fast. So that's, like I said, we try to build custom protocols that are going to work for them to make sure they're keeping the patient safe, keeping the team safe, and keeping the environment safe.
And when you've raised that awareness with these practices, do you find you get a lot of buy-in from them at that point?
Yeah, I think once, I always let offices know a lot of times I've done a service for you and I've done a disservice for you today. I've now educated you of kind of what you should be doing. We've kind of built out that custom protocol. So that's the service we provided. The disservice is you now can say we didn't know, because now you've been educated on it and I think most people know that in their heart of hearts of what they should be doing. But like I said, should be doing and doing are really two different things.
And that's where you guys can come in, where you could take that piece away from them and manage it for them and keep their compliance very high.
Yep.
And what makes Solmetex different from others maybe trying to solve the same problem?
Yeah, like I said, where our CEO's vision was of taking these five companies and merging them into one. Nobody else is a fully comprehensive end-to-end water solution. Like I said, handling water into the practice, through the patient, and out of the practice. Most of our competitors touch one piece of that, and they don't do it all. From like I said, amalgam capture to vacuum line cleaners to water testing and shocking to isolation dentistry, where the water passes through the patient and then exiting the practice on the amalgam side and just controlling the vacuum lines and all that. Everybody else touches a small piece of that can basically from start to finish can help you build a custom protocol for all that and allow you to build out a plan and use tools to help you be successful in that.
So very much a one-stop shop
Very much.
to get all your compliance in order. And where do you see the biggest opportunities for innovation or impact within dentistry right now with the services you provide?
Well, the biggest opportunity is, like I said, getting, people more in tune with that. We shouldn't have 70% of practices in the US not test, shocking, and treating. Some will do one part of that. Some will do some of that. We need every office doing that. It's kind of the golden rule. If you sat down in your chair, you'd want to do that. I think a lot of times if you, from the hand pieces, put water in a cup and ask them to drink it, they probably wouldn't. And most offices and most practice owners have a filtration system in their house, which means they're not even drinking the water coming out of the city lines in their own house, but yet that's the same water coming into the practice. So I think a lot of it's just following that golden rule, and we want to see how do we get more practices capturing amalgam, making sure the vacuum lines are clean so we're not impacting the waterways, making sure we're maintaining water lines inside the practice to keep the patients, the teams, and the environment safe. So that's our goal. We believe every drop matters, and that's what we're trying to get accomplished and through the dental industry.
Fantastic. And where is Solmetex at right now as a business? And what does growth look like for you in the next 12 to 18 months?
We're doing fine as a business. We had almost 14% growth last year, which in the dental industry is phenomenal. We've had, double-digit growth for the past few years. We're looking to have double-digit growth again this year. We just purchased a company at the end of 2025 on December 31st called Relief, which is very similar to Dry Shield, but it works more in the hygiene operatory. Dry Shield works with dentists and assistants. Relief works in the hygiene world really good to capture sols and allow them to perform more efficiently. So we'll definitely see some growth from that sector. We're always looking to evaluate how we treat water and what we do in ways to simplify that. So we have some opportunities there to look at some new technology to change the game in that to make it easier for offices. And obviously, the ultimate goal is to make patients safe. We'll probably look to enhance our surgical side of our business, make it more efficient, more profitable for the surgeons that perform socket preservations and implant dentistry. And then, we always have an eye out for, what is something new. We like to play in more niche profiles versus kind of the Me Too profiles. So we always have our eyes set to see what else and what type of new technology is on its way and kind of in the compliance infection control world.
And is there anything that you've seen that piques your interest in terms of new technology and innovations that are coming through?
There definitely are. Our R&D team is definitely looking at some better, safer ways to remediate when we have outbreaks in dental unit water lines. We definitely have some newer technology. We can't really talk about it yet of looking at better, faster, safer ways to treat those water lines. So, the future's bright. And we're excited to, like I said, make the life of the clinicians and the teams easier and really make sure patients are walking into a dental practice and walking out safe like they assume they are every single day.
Fantastic. Where do you see the biggest opportunity in scaling in the business? Have you looked at international, going into different countries, maybe Europe?
Yeah, currently right now, we sell primarily in the US and Canada. We are in the process of filing all the proper procedures and paperwork we need to launch outside the US. We'll probably start with a few products and a few product lines, and the hopes is, in probably 3 to 5 year range, we would be selling everything outside of the U.S. So yeah, we're looking to scale and to grow worldwide. That's our plan, and that's our mission. And like I said, really trying to help support both private practice practitioners and DS to make sure they're safe and compliant, and really protecting that softer side of the EBITDA dollar because their job is to grow EBITDA and grow revenue. Our job is to make sure we can keep them safe and compliant in the back end. So when they go to transact, they can have a higher multiple because that EBITDA dollar is stronger by cutting costs and by preventing outbreaks and lawsuits and things like that. So that's really where we play.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for that. Very interesting. And where can people learn more about Solmetex or get in touch with your team?
Absolutely. You can definitely reach out to me. I'm pretty visible, pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you look at Steve Craig, Solmetex, easily able to find me. My email address is scraig@solmetex.com. I'm also available there. But yeah, if we can help anybody out, or if anybody just wants to learn more about sales, leadership, and all that, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and that. I'm trying to help younger sellers, help people get into leadership, and just kind of learn how to have a more productive, happy life.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. Excellent talking to you. I'll keep an eye out on Solmetex and I wish you all the best for the future.
I appreciate the conversation. All right. Thank you.